Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dishing with Stephanie's Dish, the podcast where we talk to people in the food space. And today I have my friend Rachael White. And Rachel, you're a fairly new friend of mine that I met
Yeah,
on the set of our food doll shoot that we did for the Taste Buds.
that's right. That was such a fun day.
It was fun. And you and I had been followers, but you know how you follow people on Instagram and then you meet them in real life and you don't connect the dots? You have an Instagram handle called Set the Table Photography.
Yep, correct.
So I had followed you, and then at the food doll shoot, they had asked if they could have a food stylist there. And I was like, sure, yeah, great, whatever. That'd be awesome to figure out what food stylists do and how they do their magic. And then you were there, and I didn't put together that you were that person until like at the very end of the shoot, which was fun to be like,
Yeah.
oh, yes.
Yep.
So thanks for being my guest today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been so excited about this.
So yeah, you were a real delight to meet on that shoot. And usually when we do Taste Buds with Stephanie, which I should say is the TV show that I do on Fox 9 in Minneapolis, and it's also, I think, in other markets. I think we're going to end up in Chicago and Austin and some other
Oh,
spots.
fun.
We don't have a food stylist on site. Like we have a super small crew. We mostly shoot in my kitchen. But in this particular shoot, we were with Food Dolls and they were getting ready to promote their new cookbook, Pretty Delicious, which I think it's today and maybe it was yesterday, but it ended up on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, it's like number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's so
Okay,
fun to
so
watch them succeed with that.
do you remember at that shoot us talking about that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we are going to manifest it. We're going to put it into the air right now because they were saying, oh, we would really love this. And for those of you that maybe don't know, pre-sales on a cookbook are really important. And when your cookbook goes live, if you can get enough pre-sales, they all count towards that one day. So you can get on the New York Times bestseller list. Now, Food Dolls with 8 million followers are in a trajectory of their own and will probably stay there, I imagine, for some time. But
Yep.
for the rest of us, we would just be like, yes, I could get there once.
Yep.
So, Rachel, talk a little bit about what a food stylist does or what your trajectory was. Well, two things about how did you get here and then what's your actual job?
Sure. So I mean, as I think a lot of people do in the food space, I have a very non-linear storyline of how I got here. I actually majored in communication and music in college, thinking I'd do something in one or both of those areas. And a year after my husband and I met in college, we got married a couple years after graduation. And then a year after that, we ended up moving to Tokyo, Japan for 4 years, which I know you were just there,
I
which was so
loved
fun to
it so
watch.
much.
And when we went there, I did not have a job. So my official title was trailing spouse. And it's like the worst title ever. It's like, I hate everything about this. But my husband was teaching at an international school, and I just kind of was hanging out. Like I did some subbing, but I didn't have anything else going on. And hilariously, my husband's name is Brad. I bought Brad a camera and I was like, he loves taking pictures. He's going to have so much fun with this DSLR, walking around the city, taking pictures of stuff. But of course, he was working all the time and this camera's just sitting there collecting dust. And I was like, I'm just gonna pick this up. And I started photographing our food that we were eating, when we'd go out, but
Yeah.
mostly when we were just cooking at home. So I'd put together these dishes and take pictures, send them to our family. And then I started a food blog called Tokyo Terrace and started sharing everything on there. And that was kind of where things began for me. So the ball really started rolling at that point. I got a recipe published in the Daily Yomiuri, which is like the one of the newspapers in Japan, and that was really exciting. And then from there, I sort of went back and forth between do I want to be a food blogger or do I want to really focus on the more creative side of things? And, I had one of my kids in Tokyo. He's just turned 13. And then I had another kid 3 years later. And, I was all over the place. So I didn't really have a whole lot of direction for a while. We also moved a couple times in there. And then in the last couple of years, well, I should say, even though things were not consistent at that point, I was always involved in some kind of food styling or photography because it was something I couldn't not do. Like I had to be involved in it somehow. It's like my life's breath to make food beautiful. And I love capturing that in any space, really. It can be the fanciest, like, five-star dinner somewhere out, or it can be like the most humble thing that I've made at home, like a boxed macaroni and cheese with like some fun stuff on top of it. I just love making stuff look pretty. So that is kind of how I got to where I am now, which is I am focusing largely on food styling and I do some food photography. I do a lot of food styling assisting for other stylists in the Twin Cities area. And so when I do that kind of work, my job is basically to do some of the grunt work for them. So a lot of the little things so they can have like a bigger picture of what a dish is going to look like. And then, I get the job of like I've sorted tortilla chips before and like taken out the broken ones. So that's one aspect of my job. But again, it's like the whole point is just to make food look as appetizing as possible. So you want somebody to look at it and say, I need that. Like I need to put that in my mouth. Um, and then another part of my job is I do freelance food photography and styling, like as a package deal. So food bloggers will sometimes send me their recipes and I will photograph and style them in my home. And in that case, it's oftentimes old recipes that they want revamped so that they can post some fresh photos of it. Um, and sometimes it's new recipes too, but that's always something that I love doing that since my roots are kind of in the food blogging space.
And
Um,
yeah, I think people don't realize that a lot of the Google AdWords algorithms and the things you click on, we're always in a chase to make our content stickier, let Google see it more. And
yeah,
Google
yeah.
requires like updated photos, updated text, variations, add-ons, all of those things over the course of years keep that um, site stickier and those
Mhm.
recipes more attractive. So
Yep.
creators, like I don't want to go back and make something necessarily that I've made 62 times. So it's
Yep.
fun to sub that out, I guess, as it were.
Yep, exactly. And I've found too that a lot of food bloggers or recipe creators who have a website, there's so much that goes into that that most people don't see. Like, I think if you're inexperienced in that area, you just assume that it's mostly just cooking and photographing the food and then writing a blurb about it. But there is so much behind the scenes that they're doing. And a lot of people are just like, okay, I need to offload this photography piece so that my brain power can go to some of these other things like SEO and my Google ranking and things like that. So it's really fun to be able to step in and say, like, I got you. Like,
Yeah,
let's do this together. I get to do what I love to do, and they can focus on where they feel like their strengths are. So it's really fun.
it is this whole crazy space because I started like you started, where I just started like taking pictures of food and I was making recipes that I liked and
Mm,
I was recreating some of the stuff that our family made. My mom had died and I was like trying to refigure out how she made her
mm.
meatballs and that sort of thing. And then you're like, oh, this will be fun. Let's just start documenting and blogging. And then it becomes more fun. And also, like, at some point, if you get any work in the space, now it becomes a job.
Yep.
And then that job grows. And then you start to find yourself like you have this imposter period of time, right? Where
Oh, yeah.
you're just like doing this job, but you can't believe people are really like paying you money to do this job.
Right. Yep.
And then like the cookbook things happen and the social media things happen. And like I am having this real world experience in that I'm like backing in now to all
Mm.
the stuff I didn't know, like all the
Hmm.
SEO and oh, you need 6 images instead of just one. And I was so focused on getting one good image. Now, they're asking me for six. I'm like, holy palomino, I don't know.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's just I'm almost for me personally, I'm like backing into trying to be a professional.
Mm.
And also like there's so much about creating that's fun. And when it gets unfun, I get real just like, "Ah, I don't want to do that."
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think you mentioned like that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm getting paid to do this. Like, what the heck? And like when I started doing photography and styling and actually getting paid for it, that was back in like 2013 was when I started. This whole thing started in like 2008 for
Yep.
me. And then by 2013, I started getting hired for things. And hilariously, like my first job, it was like, we'll pay you $25 a month for one recipe. Anyway, I feel like if you don't put a high enough value on it, um, it all starts to, it takes away the joy that you feel doing it just in your free time, even because you just feel so bogged down. And like it does, it takes a lot of time and resources. And you are always learning, and that takes time and money to be able to put, the effort into that. But it's tricky and it's hard when there's so many people, like way back when I started, agreeing to something for $25 a month. Like, I don't regret it because it gave me a really good experience and a better understanding of how to of how to value my time.
Yeah.
But it's tough because there's a wide range out there.
And now, like, I don't know how you do your accounting, but the food, like, I just was looking year over year, food costs have increased in the Twin Cities 22%.
Yep.
So in some of my arrangements, I just buy the food and then I make the stuff and it's all based in my pricing. But food is getting to be so much, I'm having to really calculate that in and how we're
Yep.
moving. Do you usually calculate food in or do you?
So I typically will say like unless I have everything on hand, I will have whoever I'm doing the work for reimburse me for groceries.
Yep.
It just is easier that way because yeah, it does get really hard. Um, people say, well, don't you just eat all the food that but no, like I don't.
A lot of
Sometimes
times
sitting
when
out
you're
for too
done working
long.
on it, you don't
Yeah,
even
then
want
you're
to eat
just
it.
done. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like, I have a family of four and not everybody's going to eat everything that I make. And so yeah, so I do ask that my clients reimburse me for the groceries. And sometimes they'll tell me like I'd rather like have an Instacart delivery sent to your house or something, and they'll just do it that way. Um, but yeah, that seems like a pretty like an easier way to go about it, especially as prices are changing, because then they can kind of say like, well, do I want to release control of that? And does that change what I want to do or like what I want to use in the recipe or whatever? But yeah, that is definitely a challenge, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So,
So
um,
in your work, like can you put a percentage on? Like I just had this idea that most of the people that were hiring you were like brands, like food
yeah.
brands. And it
Mhm.
sounds like you're getting a significant amount of work too from the bloggers themselves.
Yeah, so I right now have two very consistent food bloggers that come to me pretty much every month to have me do recipes for them, which is lovely. And then I also recently just got hired at Land O'Lakes as an on-call photographer for them. So that's been really fun.
Yes.
So it's nice to have the kind of the juxtaposition of such different areas of food because I feel like that helps me make some connections. It helps me learn a lot. It really like keeps the job interesting because those are two very different things. Like the stuff that I do at Land O'Lakes is completely different from what I do for these food bloggers. But it's all just so fun. I just love it.
When you go to like a Land O'Lakes shoot, for instance, traditionally, how many people are in the room working on that piece of food?
So I'm like 3 weeks into it right now with them. And they've got such a, for the type of photo shoots that we're doing, they have such a wonderful team of people, and most of them are on call. Um, a lot of them are recipe developers by trade, and then they come in and help with the styling. And so we all kind of have our hands in the styling piece of it, which is actually really great. But I'm trying to think, like today we had one, two, three, four, like four main people working on stuff. And then we had a couple of assistants who were helping with like cleanup and all of that. So, I mean, it's a nice size group and it's more of a relaxed setting for what we're doing. So it's not like a huge studio shoot. I've been on a Target shoot where it's like there's like 20 people in here and I don't
I know,
know.
it's so crazy because like we're filming this TV show and we literally have like three people
Uh-huh.
and myself, and that's it. And
Yeah.
it's just we're taking the pictures, we're doing the styling. It's just
Yep.
it's crazy how it all works.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy taking photographs or food styling more?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, it's so hard. I do really love both. I think some of it depends on the situation, but if I had to really pick one, I'd probably say that I enjoy the styling part more. I think I've just always had this thought in my head, like you eat with your eyes first. And so no matter what I'm doing, whether it's for work or otherwise, I'm always trying to make it look as pretty as I can, which sometimes is a huge challenge, you know? Like I was photographing lentil soup a couple years ago. It's like everything's brown. What
Yeah,
do I even do with this? But in the end, like it ended up looking really beautiful just from a little garnish of parsley and like you can add just these little tiny things that just take it from being something totally boring and uninteresting to all of a sudden like you can imagine taking a bite out of that bowl, even if it's just on your computer screen. And I think there's something so just fulfilling about that. And being able to like see the difference that you can make with just these little touches. And I think some of that is uh, I've always kind of dabbled in art, and I think that being able to bring that into food styling just makes it so special. I love
yeah.
it.
When you're like having a dinner party or when you're at home, like just
Mhm.
cooking for your family, are there like I don't want to like break it down to like tips necessarily, but to make the food look prettier, are there like some go-to hacks that you have?
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can invest in is um, serving platters that are simple. You don't want them to be too detailed. You don't need a bunch of stuff on them. Like just have a few go-to platters that you can use like for pasta or salad or because a lot of those you can use for multiple things, right? So people are like, well, what do I use this giant bowl for if I'm not putting salad in it? Well, put like a bunch of noodles in there or pile up some like grilled chicken or something,
Yep.
but have some pieces that you really feel that feel like a blank canvas. So when you put your food on there, the food really pops and stands out. You don't want something that's going to take away from what you're serving because then everybody's going to be focused on the plate and not on your beautiful food.
Right.
So that would be one thing. The other thing is don't be afraid of color. So like if you are serving something that you're just like, "Bleh, like what is happening here? Don't be afraid to add, even if it's not originally in the recipe, like add parsley, add cilantro, add like if you do some parsley and like red pepper flakes on top of something, even just a little, that just that little pop of color can make all the difference.
When we
Um,
were together, you
yeah.
like sliced some scallions and I would just chop up and down. You kind of sliced them on the bias and
Yep.
then
Yep.
threw that over and it just that little cut made a big difference.
Yeah. And I think thinking about kind of thinking outside the box, like how can you prepare something a little differently so that it's a little more unique? Like one of my favorite tricks is in coleslaw to make carrot ribbons. So you just take like a vegetable peeler and make long ribbons out of your carrot and then like toss that in with the rest of your coleslaw. And instead of it all being those little matchsticks,
Yep.
it just adds another layer of like texture and color and it kind of adds some variety that you wouldn't normally have. So yeah, just kind of thinking about different ways that you can mix stuff up, I think is always great too.
Are there people that you follow on Instagram that you're just like obsessed with, or do you have to almost not look because you don't want to steal looks?
Yeah, it's it's hard. I think it's not that I don't follow people because I'm worried that I'm going to steal their look, but it's more because of the imposter syndrome stuff that can really creep in.
Yeah.
I think at one point I was following so many food photographers and stylists, and I was just like inundated with everything. And I just felt like I can't find my style when I'm just consuming everybody else's.
Yeah.
And so I had to really take a look at that pretty closely and try to figure out, well, what other influences can I bring into my social media life um, that will help me in my work? And so I follow some people who like do watercolor tutorials or post about flowers, and just like adding that variety just helps with my creative brain
Yeah,
so much. Yeah.
my husband's a writer, and when he's working on a book, he like will only read nonfiction
Mm,
because he doesn't
hmm.
want to get those fiction voices in his head, like and the algorithms, the more you look at something or follow something, the more it serves that up to you. So it's
Hmm.
kind of hard to get out of that spiral. And
Yep.
like food is trendy too. Like, we're kind of in this space where a lot of people, like, I'm just trying to think of like food styling. Like, we had this swash of the hummus, and then everything was piled up on the hummus, and that was for like a swash of mashed potatoes, a swash of squash. It was
Yep.
just the shoosh, and you'd see it in a restaurant, and then it started to get into the books.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really easy for ideas like that to stick, which is not a bad thing. And I think, there's a point where obviously if you're straight up copying somebody, that's not okay. But taking influences from other people's work, that's kind of how creative work becomes something new. You have to take something that's already existed and build on it. Um, yeah.
It's hard to do that too. And I think about that. Like sometimes I panic with recipes because it's like, did I see this somewhere? What was it the same? Was it like
Yeah.
that? Like it's kind of hard to know. And in my first book, I was sort of paralyzed because I was doing a lot of our family's recipes. So it was like, here's Janice's potato salad. Can I actually make a change to her potato
Mm-hmm.
salad? And was it her potato salad or where did it originally come from? And something becomes your own. Recipes just in and of itself are kind of hard to track that way.
Yeah, it is super hard because it does feel like, well, everything's been done, is
Yep.
how it feels. And we're making these little tweaks to make it our own, but it still feels like, nope, this belongs to someone else. And I've had this happen with my own recipes, and where I have developed a recipe and it's been around for a while, and then all of a sudden I'll see something somewhere else, and I'm like, that's literally the exact thing that I made
Yeah.
forever ago, which it used to bother me. But now I'm like, nope, you know what? There are only so many combinations of stuff.
Yeah.
And part of the reason we come up with these ideas is because they work. And, when you put flavors together that make sense, like somebody else is going to think of it too, and that's okay.
Yeah. And also, like, I don't know, we have had all these discussions about cultural appropriation of food.
Mm, yeah.
Like, if you, I'll just use a taco, I guess, as an example. So if you're making like what they call the gringo taco, which is sort of the ground beef, the white flour tortilla, lettuce, and tomatoes, and you then if you decide to make like a more authentic taco, maybe you're going to do like a pork carnitas and you're going to have cilantro and pickled red onion and pickled jalapeno. Are you appropriating a culture that originated in? And I'm
Mhm.
glad. I personally have a really hard time with that because food is medicine and food is life and has been for since the beginning of time. And
Mhm.
yes, every culture has a way of making something their own, but like just the idea of what is a taco, whether
Mhm.
it's a corn tortilla, whether it's a pita, whether it's a seaweed wrap. I mean, cultures have wrapped food in various things since the beginning of time.
Yep.
I don't want to really get hung up on who made the original taco. And
Right.
I think it's gotten so hard. We're a global world, we're a global economy,
Yep.
we're globally influenced by food.
Yep. And it's very tricky. I have, I'm not ashamed to say, been called out for posting a recipe and trying to say, like, I ate this in this country and here's my version of it. And I faced a lot of backlash for it. And I think we're in a we're in a period of time where it can be very easy to freak out at other people. Um, and I don't think that that's always wrong. I think there is a productive way to go about it, and not everybody is able to do that. But I think as long as it's coming from a place of like, hey, I'm just going to let you know, like, here, I'm from this place and I grew up there. I understand this dish that you have posted the recipe for. And like, here are some things that you missed, you know?
Yeah,
But I literally like was getting death threats from people for this recipe that I
that's
put up.
crazy.
And it's like, I fully was ready to like learn. I was like, okay, great. Can you tell me how can I fix this so that it's more authentic? And then I just never heard anything back, which was such a bummer because I think if you're open and like willing to say like I messed up, but I want to make this right and I want to make sure that I learn what it means for this recipe to be authentic, I think that we should be able to say like, okay, like let's have an open conversation about it. But you're right. I think when it comes down to something like a taco that's just ubiquitous, it's really difficult to say like, well, we're going to really narrow this down and we're going to
Yeah.
say like, you have to give all the details about where it came from and what year. And I think a lot of that is really useful to learn about. And also, you know, there's a way to do it that is effective.
I had to actually, this is kind of a weird story, but there's a person that follows me on different channels and different TV things that I've done. And they're always freaked out that I'm not wearing my hair in a ponytail or wearing a hairnet when I cook on TV.
Yeah.
And I get it. As a chef, they'll always start out like as a chef.
Mhm.
Well, when I am making food on TV, I am there as a person that's supposed to look good on TV. And I'm not cooking in a professional kitchen, and I'm not cooking food that anyone is going to be eating, actually. So I'm there with my full hair trying to look like a attractive person on television that you want to watch make food.
Mhm.
If I were to show up with my gloves and my hairnet, that wouldn't be the same experience. And
Yeah.
while it maybe bugs you, I get it, but you have to like think of the context of the which I'm preparing this food. When
Mhm.
we're on the TV show and we go into a professional kitchen, I do put my hair up because that's the standard that they have in their professional kitchens, which I understand. But like every post, this person is just like, "Can you put your hair up? I don't understand why you don't have your hair up. It's gross.
Mhm.
I don't want to get hair in my food." So finally, I just like sent them an email. Oh, actually, no, I blocked them on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And then they sent me an email saying the exact things that they've been saying. And I like was like, do you realize that you're at this point bullying me
Yeah.
about not wearing my hair in a ponytail on television? And let
Yeah.
me explain for the 100th time why I'm not. And I'm not going to. And by the way, do you watch Rachel Ray, Ina Garten, Giada, the Pioneer Woman? I mean, these are also people on television. We're not preparing food in a commercial kitchen. And your inability to let go of it is now becoming something about you that
Mhm.
I need to block and I need
Yep.
to stop having this conversation. And you are bullying me about this and I'm done. And she replied and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how this was coming across." And okay,
Yeah.
maybe you didn't. I'll give you
Yep.
that. But I'm also done having this conversation with you. And if
Yep.
it bugs you so much, you shouldn't watch. People are crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. And it sounds like maybe she doesn't watch too many other food personalities on
I
TV.
don't even know. I just was like, I cannot keep having this conversation and you bring me
Totally.
down every time I open up this email. So stop.
Yep.
So
Yep.
hopefully now it'll stop.
Yeah,
Um,
I hope so.
yes. And so that was kind of a long way around, which is to say that we're in a creative business, doing lots of cool creative things. I really enjoyed working with you on the food dolls shoot.
Yeah, that
And
was such a great day. And that was the first time I had styled anything for a show. So that was really fun for me to get to do because we did a couple shows after that and I tagged along with them to help style their food for some other, well, we were on the Jason show.
yep.
Um, they were on the Jason show.
What did you make on Jason's show?
That was their Greek cowgirl caviar. It's so good. I had a bunch left over after we made it, and I had it for lunch like every day that week, and it was so
Yeah, they
delicious.
have really good, simple food, and their book is
Yep,
pretty delicious.
yep.
Are you still posting on Instagram, and where can we
Yep.
follow you to stay up to date?
Yes, I do still post on Instagram. That's pretty much the only place that I update almost anything at the moment, but But yeah, please give me a follow if that's interesting to you.
It
And
is set the table. Do you feel pressure about video?
um to start doing video, you mean? I did for a little while, but I don't anymore. I think there's a point where you have to say, like, it's not that I don't want to learn new skills, but I also know when to call it.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I don't need to branch out like that right now. If it becomes that way, then maybe I'll change my mind. But I am very thankful to be working with a lot of women that I really admire. And as long as I get to continue working with them, I am very happy with the skill set that I have. And I'm so
yeah,
thankful to have all of those influences around me all the time. Like positive female energy is just, there's nothing like it. So,
yeah. It's funny too. Like I just think back to that food doll shoot because we've stayed in contact.
mhm,
They've helped me with a couple things. I've given them some advice on a couple things, and they
so
were
good.
so delightful just as people. It was great to
Mhm,
meet you. You know, you do a lot of this work solitarily in your kitchen or
mhm.
alone, and then you get out into these spaces and you actually meet people,
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
like, "Oh, this is so great. They're so nice."
Yes. And I think that's been the nicest thing for me over the last couple of years because, we lived in Japan and then we lived in Colorado and then we moved back to Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota, so it was coming home for me. But we've been back here for six, 6 years, 5 years, something like that. But then, we moved back in 2019 and then COVID happened like a year later. And I just had felt very disconnected. And I'd been watching this amazing food scene in the Twin Cities and just like for a long time I'd been kind of watching it from a distance. And then we moved back and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to connect with these people in real life. And then stupid COVID
Yeah,
happened and everything like got stalled. And so the last couple years have just been so lovely because I really have been able to make wonderful connections like with Alia and Radwa and with you. And it's just been like life-giving. And I just appreciate it all so much. And um, you know, since we've been talking about the food dolls, they're like such warm people. Like I know people on social media have to have like a certain way about them. They're like that in real life.
yes,
Like they're just warm, lovely people. And
yes,
like from day one, they're like, hug.
yep,
And I was like, deal, I think we're gonna get along just fine.
yeah. And I
Um,
felt that way about you too. Like when,
Same. Yeah, I
that.
was so comfortable with you as well. Yeah. Yep.
And it's fun. It makes the job fun. And as creators, we need to stick together because
Mhm.
we're all in this kind of weird space and it can be a little isolating at times.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
So it's
And I
really
think
fun
that's
to
where a
chat.
lot of the imposter syndrome stuff comes from, is because it's often such an isolated experience and you just get stuck in your own head. And then the more you're around other people, I think the more comfortable a lot of the time you end up feeling.
Yeah.
And I would have thought it would be the opposite. For a long time, I think that's how I felt. I was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing my own thing at home because it feels less scary. But it turns out, like, as soon as I stepped out of my comfort zone and started, actually, when I started assisting, food styling assisting, and that got me out of my home, that changed everything for me. It's been I've worked with Maren Ellingbo King a couple of times, actually quite a few times, and Brooke Faudree, and it's just these people who are so talented and so wonderful, and um, I've just learned so much from all of
Yeah.
them. It's just such a
So
treat. I
great.
love it. I love it.
Well, it's been a delight to talk with you today. Thanks
Yeah,
for
you
being our
too.
guest. I'm sure we will cross paths again soon.
I
And,
hope so. We better
yeah, maybe I'll start sending you recipes. I
do
just
it.
I got my book today in its first form that I'm seeing like the
Oh, I'm
pictures and
so
the recipes all
excited.
together. And
That's
I was thinking
awesome.
about you because you were such a good food stylist and I've been doing it all myself. And this is the last book I can do it myself because it's
Yeah,
sort of a cabiny rustic type book.
sure.
But I
Yep.
was like, oh, okay, this is the last one you can photograph yourself, Stephanie.
Well, I'm there for you. So
I appreciate it.
you
All
just
right.
let me
Thanks for
know.
being my guest today, Rachel.
Thanks so much,
All
Stephanie. It was
right.
a
And I'll
blast.
put your Instagram handle in the notes and people can follow you at Set the Table Photography, correct?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome.
All
Okay,
right.
thanks,
Bye-bye.
Stephanie. Bye.